Imagine you're trying to find a specific piece of information. What do? You pull out your phone, type a few words into Google, and boom, instant results. But what if you lived 1,000 years ago? What if there was no internet, no search engines, no cloud storage? How did humanity preserve and share its most precious asset, knowledge? Welcome to the medieval internet, a system built not on silicon and code, but on parchment, ink, and the tireless dedication of monks. Let's travel back in time. The Roman Empire has crumbled, and with it the vast network of libraries and schools that once spanned Europe. Chaos reigns, and priceless scrolls of philosophy, science, and literature are being lost to fire, flood, and neglect. It felt like humanity was hitting the delete button on its own history. But in quiet corners of the continent, a new kind of hero was emerging, not with swords, but with quills. These were the monks, living in secluded monasteries, and they were about to launch the most ambitious backup project in history. Their server rooms were called scriptoriums. Forget clean rooms and humming hard drives. Picture a stone chamber, often chilly, lit only by sunlight from a high window because an open flame was too risky. The air would smell of ink, drying parchment, and the subtle scent of beeswax from candles used in other parts of the monastery. This was the factory floor of medieval knowledge. Here, monks, and sometimes nuns in their own convents, spent their entire lives as human photocopiers. The process was incredibly labor-intensive. First, you needed the hardware, parchment. This wasn't your everyday paper. It was made from animal skin, usually calf, sheep, or goat, that had to be scraped, stretched, and treated until it was smooth enough to write on. A single large book, like a Bible, could require the skins of over 100 animals. It was expensive, durable, and the medieval equivalent of a high-capacity solid-state drive. Next came the software, the ink. Monks were also master chemists, mixing their own inks from things like oak galls, iron salts, and gum arabic. It was a messy, smelly process, but the result was a permanent, deep black ink that has lasted for centuries. They also created vibrant colors for illustrations, using ground-up minerals like lapis lazuli for brilliant blues, or even insects for rich reds. With the hardware and software ready, the real work began: copying. A monk would sit for 6, 7, even 8 hours a day, hunched over a sloping desk, meticulously transcribing a text from an older manuscript, known as the exemplar, onto fresh parchment. Every letter had to be perfect. There was no backspace key, no undo button. A mistake could mean scraping a thin layer off the parchment with a knife, or, in a worst-case scenario, starting the entire page over. It was a test of focus, patience, and unwavering faith. Think of it as manually coding a website, character by character, without a way to check for bugs until you were finished. But they weren't just copying, they were curating, editing, and even innovating. Monks were the original fact-checkers. If they had multiple copies of the same text, they would compare them, note the differences in the margins, and try to reconstruct the most accurate version. These notes, called scholia, are like the comment section of the medieval world, where scholars debated and clarified the original author's intent. They also invented user interface upgrades that we still use today. Things like punctuation, capital letters to start sentences, and spaces between words weren't always standard. Monks helped popularize these features to make texts easier to read and understand. They developed indexes and tables of contents, the original sitemaps that allowed readers to navigate complex books without reading them from start to finish. They were essentially creating a more user-friendly experience for the medieval reader. And let's not forget the artwork. The most important manuscripts were illuminated, decorated with intricate illustrations, borders, and lavish initial letters. These weren't just pretty pictures, they were data visualizations. An illustration could explain a complex scientific concept, depict a historical event, or help the illiterate understand a biblical story. The famous inhabited initial A large letter filled with scenes and figures was like a thumbnail preview, giving you a glimpse of the chapter's content. So how did this knowledge get shared? How did it go viral? Monasteries formed a decentralized network across Europe. When a monastery needed a copy of a book they didn't have, they would borrow it from another. A monk might travel for weeks, carrying a precious manuscript, to deliver it to another scriptorium for copying. Once the copy was complete, the original would be returned. This system of interlibrary loans was the medieval file-sharing network. It was slow, it was risky, but it worked. Over centuries, this network ensured that a text copied in Ireland could eventually find its way to a monastery in Italy or Germany. They were also creating a searchable database. Monasteries developed library catalogs, listing all the books they held. These weren't just simple lists. They often included summaries and keywords, making it easier for a visiting scholar to find the information they needed. A monk looking for information on, say, herbal medicine could consult the catalog to find the relevant books, much like we use keywords to search a digital database today. This monastic network didn't just preserve ancient knowledge from Greece and Rome, it also became a hub for new ideas. Monks were scholars in their own right. They wrote original works on theology, history, music, and science. The Venerable Bede in England wrote the first history of the English people. Hildegard of Bingen in Germany wrote about medicine, botany, and music, all while running a thriving convent. The monasteries were not just archives, they were research and development labs. This system was the bedrock of Western civilization for 1,000 years. Without the scriptorium, the works of Aristotle, Plato, and Virgil might have vanished forever. The scientific and mathematical knowledge of the ancient world, which later fueled the Renaissance and the scientific revolution, was kept alive on these meticulously crafted pages. When the first universities began to appear in cities like Bologna, Paris, and Oxford, where did they get their first textbooks? From the libraries of the monasteries. The invention of the printing press in the 15th century was the great disruptor of this medieval internet. Suddenly, a book that took a monk a year to copy could be mass-produced in a matter of weeks. Knowledge could now be shared faster and wider than ever before. The age of the scribe was coming to an end, but the legacy of the monks endures. They taught us that preserving knowledge is a conscious, active choice. It doesn't just happen. They demonstrated a level of dedication to information that is hard to fathom in our age of digital distraction. They were the original information architects, the first database managers, and the silent guardians of human thought. So the next time you effortlessly Google a fact or download a book in seconds, take a moment to remember the monks. Remember the scriptorium, the smell of ink, the feel of parchment, and the quiet, determined scratching of a quill. They were the original hackers of knowledge, building a network of ideas that spanned a continent and a millennium, ensuring that the lights of civilization, however dim they seemed at times, never truly went out. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back in time. If you found this interesting, please give this video a like and consider subscribing for more deep dives into the hidden corners of history. We'd love to have you as part of our community. See you in the next one.